Hey, Fiber here with a guide on everyone's favorite hero. He has an insane damage floor, an interesting kit, and the best animations ever with an all-new form. And on that note, it's time to try that form out myself. Today we will be checking out his awesome abilities and how they work, as well as his powerful Eidolons. Then I have calculated his best builds and light cones for you guys today. And I'll talk about pull value and team synergies at the end, with probably a whole video on that topic coming eventually. Like and subscribe and share to friends if you enjoyed this video, and let's begin. Finan is a physical destruction DPS and is our 4th unit of this combo, but he will take inspiration from everyone before him and go beyond. Among base stats, he has some insanely high defensive stats, we'll see why, alongside a decent amount of attack but low speed. For trace priority, just get everything. His ult is the lowest priority, but he uses everything in his kit. Now onto his monstrously long abilities. His gameplay will revolve around getting to 12 core flame stacks, lore accuracy is a must for him, and then he will ult, transforming into a whole new entity. Finan's talent, and we'll see he has a second one later, will let him ult after reaching 12 core flame stacks. You can accumulate 3 excess stacks though, much like Acheron, and those will be regained after ending his ult's transformation. Our first way of gaining core flame stacks is also detailed here. He will gain 1 point when he is the target of any ability, and that also means enemies, so for instance if one attacks Finan. However, if it is an ally that targets him, he will also get a 30% crit damage buff, just consider this permanent. Our other main way of obtaining core flame is through his regular skill. This bad boy actually hits for quite a nice amount, but it will also give Finan 2 core flame stacks every time. So his turns are quite important for the ult generation. In his A2, he will then get 1 point of core flame at the start of the battle, and when his transformation ends, he will gain an additional 3 points. So you can technically end his first ult and still have 6 core flame if you had some excess stacks from before. And in his A4, he will gain a final core flame source. When receiving energy regen ability effects from teammates, he will gain 1 point of core flame. Read that correctly, energy ability effects. So no, this does not work with shared feeling or quid pro quo, that would be silly strong, but it does work for things like Ting Yun ult and Sunday ult. It gives extra synergy instead of just wasting energy like Acheron or Fei Xiao. This A4 also benefits from having sustain on his team, as you'll get a 45% damage buff if he got healed or shielded. Though, as of 3.4, he'd rather run sustainless, as the third buff is much better than this 45% damage. So now that we have all of his core flame sources, as said before, we want to stack it to 12 to be able to ult. Your team rotation will ensure he gets buffed as much as possible to both buff his damage for the transformation, but also charge the ultimate for said transformation. And the earlier he can ult, the more times he can act before cycle breakpoints. He will change into his second form, which we'll call Finan 2, and deploy a territory. In Finan 2's territory, everyone except Finan 2 is departed and cannot take action. They do not appear, cannot be targeted, and do not appear in the action order. He is a playable boss character. All enemies will gain physical weakness during this, helping him in Apocalyptic Shadow and versus some enemies, but not reducing their resistance. And in this state, he will not have actual turns, but instead 8 extra turns, including the one he takes immediately after ulting. Extra turns do not consume buff duration, so you can see where this is going. These extra turns have a fixed speed equal to 60% of his base speed, but that is all of those 8 extra turns that have a total speed of 60% of his base speed. This basically means that in the time it would take a 56.4 speed unit to take 1 turn, Finan 2 takes 8 whole turns. So you divide it by 7 since he immediately takes 1, and you have an action value of around 25 per turn, or a theoretical speed of nearly 400. Remember though, this is based on your base speed. Traces, speed boots, speed buffers do not count, even if speed boots and buffers like E2 Bronya can still be useful for some reasons. Anyways, on his final extra turn during his transformation, he will deal what we will call his final hit automatically, dealing a large amount of damage that gets evenly distributed to enemies. It's a very powerful single target nuke, and it's okay in AoE. So now that he's in this Omega Super Saiyan state, what can he do? Since he legit transforms into a whole new entity, Finan 2, he will gain 3 new abilities, a new talent, and use a new charge system called Scourge Charges. They will be generated and used by his enhanced forms abilities, and he can have a maximum of 7 stacks. Why it isn't 8, I don't know. But when first transforming, he will gain an initial 4 stacks of Scourge to use. He'll get a couple more later in his kit. He will be immune to CC, and he will have an enhanced basic and 2 enhanced skills, but no extra ultimate. He will also self-buff by 80% attack, as well as 270% HP. He is the solo carry after all. He needs to tank the enemies all alone. And to further boost that, 20% HP will be recovered every time he attacks. If he dies, he will instead restore part of his HP and launch his final hit and end the transformation. And when the transformation ends, all ally speed will increase by 15% to enable your next rotation. Whilst we are here, his A6 will also give him another 50% attack upon entering battle, as well as when ending his transformation. It is permanent though, and so it will help his power in his Final 2 form, but also in between his ults. And so what are these 3 abilities? His enhanced basic is Creation Bloodthorn Berry, but it is very simple. He will gain 2 Scourge stacks and perform a regular blast attack. The first enhanced skill is Calamity Soul Scorch Edict. He will gain Scourge equal to the amount of enemy targets present and gain 1 stack of Soul Scorch, which is something different to Scourge. He will also make all enemies immediately take action. When he is in the Soul Scorch state, he will have 75% damage reduction, and he will gain 1 extra stack of Soul Scorch whenever enemy targets attack or take action. He will then immediately counter after all of them finish their action, dealing skill-based damage to all of them. Every stack of Soul Scorch he accumulated will increase the counter's damage multiplier for a massive nuke. Basically, you make all enemies act and start slapping you. It's funny, but it also takes a while to watch every single enemy attack you. The more enemies the better, but this is mostly used in Pure Fiction because it will be a permanent 5 targets. Though it can be strong versus some enemies, like this Kokoli Apocalyptic Shadow, where she keeps on hitting me over and over again. In single target, you'd rather enhance basic for more Scourge, and then in 3 targets, you'd have to gauge whether advancing the enemy is detrimental to your DPS or not. Some fights actually would want you to advance the enemy so that they can unlock their mechanics. Summon adds for example, and then you can explode them all for even more damage. Some fights you don't want to do that. It has nuance and utility, which I like. The final enhanced skill is the biggest nuke yet. He will dispel all possible debuffs from himself and then deal a large amount of physical damage. The way it is distributed is based on the points of Scourge consumed. If you consume 4 stacks, you'll get the total 1170% attack multiplier, with 720% of that being a bounce attack onto random enemies and 450% being an evenly distributed attack. This will only be focused onto alive enemies, so you won't get much overflow damage. Basically, like his transformation's final hit, his damage can adapt to multiple targets, but becomes stronger the lower the target count. But he will want to consume 4 Scourge to use the max power of this second enhanced skill. This means you cannot spam it. You'll want to counter versus a bunch of enemies or use 2 enhanced basics to cycle back to this 4 Scourge. The final way to get Scourge is through his technique, but his technique is insane for other reasons too. When in the team, max technique points will be increased by 3 for more fun. But when using his technique, you'll need to consume 2 points, but it will attack all enemies in range. When entering battle, you will regenerate 25 energy for all allies, which allows them to get some insane first turn ult rotations, supercharging his own ultimate rotation. He also gets 1 SP and 2 Scourge, which will be retained for his first transformation. So combined with this second talent, you'll start your first transformation with 6 Scourge stacks and can thus Meteor Strike into Basic into Meteor Strike. And hey, Acheron, remember your technique? Well, Finan is hers but AoE. Does it matter in the grand scheme of things? No. But having another insta-kill technique is fun for fast farming content. But those are finally all of his abilities. He will want to stack up Core Flame through his turns and ally abilities, or enemy abilities if lucky, to transform into Finan 2. In that form, he is alone, but has access to devastating and adaptable abilities, as well as a myriad of buffs. But before builds and the rest, how do his Eidolons improve him? E1 gives a very funky speed increase during his transformation. First, you'll get a base inheritance increase, shortening the AV between his extra turns. But then, every enemy target defeated increases the inheritance ratio of the extra turn speed by 1.5% per kill, up to a max of 84%, and this will be permanent during the battle. Oh, and some extra crit damage. This is a very strong pure fiction buff. And you probably guessed it, but a flagship DPS will have a flagship E2. He gets an initial 20% res pen, which is wow, but now when he consumes full Scourge to use Foundation, Star Death, Verdict, he will gain an extra turn separate to his whole 8 extra turn stuff he already has. So that's the big Meteor ability, and you want to spam that anyway whenever you have full Scourge. So instead of having to expend 4 out of your 8 turns to do Meteor, Basic, Basic, Meteor, he can now do Meteor, free Basic, Basic, Meteor. You will get a few additional extra turns overall in your ult, and so extra Meteor attacks, and so this is just bonkers. Then E4 will give him an additional 4 Soul Scorch when using his Calamity skill, aka the big counter. This is essentially free multipliers for that attack. We take those. It's another PF buff, but also fine elsewhere. And finally, E6 will let him overflow on Core Flame as much as he wants now, whilst also gaining a free 6 Core Flame at the start of the battle. What this means is your first ult needs fewer stacks, so you could supercharge your Final with team buffs from allies that don't normally give him stacks, for example Cypher or an E1 Tribby. Or it lets you use your normal team, but you could now immediately ult at the end of your first ult. This would retain all your buffs and let you go again immediately. Oh, and the E6 also gives an E1 Tribby-esque buff to his Meteor attack for a final boost to damage. Here are my Eidolon calculations for Finan. I'm gonna be real, I would watch showcases to gauge just how strong Eidolons are on him. He is probably the most annoying character I've had the displeasure of calculating, and I say that as one of his biggest fans and a spreadsheet enjoyer. His kit is very volatile in Sims. E2 is just disgustingly strong, but the number I show is its max power, and in reality it'll be lower. And E6 is a very practice-based Eidolon because it can change your team comp or keep your team comp with tons more core flames. So let's finally check out his builds. For relics, he will just want to use the brand new Wave Strider set. It is one of the highest power relic sets in the game, albeit with a funky duration, but he can fully abuse it thanks to his ultimate extending the 48% attack throughout his whole transformation. Scholar Lost in Erudition will also work to a lesser extent, as he will get permanent skill damage at least alongside crit rate. His big final explosion from his transformation also counts as ultimate damage, so that'll get a small boost too. For planers, Finan also got a tailor-made new set, the Arcadia set. It will give damage percent based on missing or additional allies, and in his case, he will be alone during his Finan 2 form. That's 36 damage percent for all of his abilities during his transformation. Yum. Arcadia will be the best, and if you don't have it, the rest of his options just depend on your teammates and what they buff the most. For example, Rutilant Arena works absolutely fine as another option. It will buff all of his abilities minus the final hit explosion, but it will also buff him outside of his transformation, and those regular skills actually hit kind of hard. And any generalist sets just work like Glamoth and Space Ceiling. Funnily enough, since he self-buffs his HP so much during his ult, the 28% crit damage from Demesne is available, even if the HP is useless. And so, Finan's main stats for these relics and planars will be crit chest, most likely crit rate to get as much as possible, then speed or attack percent boots, I'll explain what I prefer in a minute, then attack or damage orb, and then attack rope always. For a stat goal, you'll want to hit 100% crit rate in combat with some nice crit damage. His best buffers offer a ton of crit damage, and he has some in his kit, you know the drill by now. Then your attack can be from 2500 to 3500 depending on main stats and your light cone. For speed, you'll probably want to aim for 136 to tune in front of supports, but you can also run base speed with some setups like Hyperspeed Sparkle with Sunday or E2 Bronya. I would definitely recommend speed for most players though, as his best team core will be using it all the time and it will allow you to get an extra 2 core flames, greatly opening team possibilities. Now for light cones, and let's check out the most gorgeous light cone yet. Thus Burns the Dawn will first offer a base attack of 687, I think the highest we've ever had. Then a base speed increase, we know where this is going. Then a permanent 18% def ignore, which is not much, but it's still nice. And then to make it niche, after using his ultimate he will obtain a buff removed at the start of his turn, which will increase the wearer's damage by 60%. Some units can use this, but he has extra turns so he doesn't remove this buff in any of them. Well, it has some pretty nasty buffs, a very high base attack, and a kit altering mechanic with the base speed increase. It is going to be his best in the slot, and it can get better. But because of how strong his E2 is, and because E1 also modifies his speed in his transformation, I would recommend investing into E1 and then E2 over S1. E2 S0 is just such a different beast compared to E1 S1. And here are some other Litecoin calculations, including the brand new Battle Pass Litecoin coming out in 3.4. Video on them soon, by the way. So kit is done, builds is done, what's left? Well, let's talk about Finan and how good he is right now. He doesn't have his Hyacinth or his Robin or Tribute or anything, so this can always change and he can get better. It feels like every DPS has a must-have unit these days. Before we start, don't let anyone tell you Finan isn't strong. Finan is stupidly strong with some crazy raw damage output and the power to destroy some content with low investment. Finan's actual problem isn't strength, but rather clunkiness, which lowers his ceiling. His kit is so unique and so cool, and you feel like you're playing a boss rather than a character. But after the dopamine wears off and you start thinking about meta viability, you start to see some cracks. Him being alone on the field means there is much less optimization to be done versus other carries. Castris getting a Mem advance thanks to a Dance Tribute proc to clutch a dragon before cycle 0 ends and it clears the wave. Finan won't have that. And that's okay for most players, but if you're someone who wants to completely maximize a character's performance, it's hard to do more on Finan. There's no min-max Eagle or Dance Tech whilst transformed, it's only benefiting the initial rotation to charge his ult and any eventual future ones. He cannot manipulate action value unlike any other team in the game during his ult, and action value is the key to scoring and maxing out the endgame. He will be able to clear it, but the future harder content is what makes it scary. But being alone also limits him versus bosses with the gimmicks. If the boss is chill like that and doesn't have weird damage reduction or invincibility states, Finan will bomber them. If they do, Finan could be sitting there having to struggle versus the gimmick. And so his main optimizations are his supports, but that can actually be a big thing. Some people playing him will miss important buff uptimes. Maybe they'll tune their supports wrong. They could ult at the wrong time. Maybe they'll forget to economize skill points and not be able to maintain buffs. Maybe you won't have Sunday's technique up for Finan's ult. Maybe you don't Robin ult at the right time to freeze action value with Finan. Maybe they don't have enough Core Flame stacks at the right time. Maybe they don't apply all the possible Sakador stacks. Maybe they want to overflow on some Core Flame to clutch a second ult on wave 2. There is actually a whole ton of optimization he can do with his many possible teams during his pre-ultimate rotations. Though, once you've learned how your specific team works with him, then you're mostly set, and when he does transform, then it kinda just becomes Unga Bunga. Again, he has a bit of nuance here too. Should I counter and bring up enemies so they can summon ads that explode and do damage? Should I save my counter because the boss might gain damage reduction or Aventurine might summon dice? Do I Meteor now or do I conserve it for my next turn or the next wave? I like the way his kit functions and the team buff min-maxing you have to do, to be honest. And any future Harmony could synergize with him in potentially new ways, just like Nihility units can with Acheron. And for casual players, just make sure you learn how your Finan team works and you'll have a complete blast. Zero cycling is never the goal, but a high damage ceiling does let DPS stay relevant longer in the right hands, as seen with Zila. He can do some zero cycles at quite low team investment, which showcases his potential, all while struggling in other matchups that show off his clunkiness. But you can't bring every DPS everywhere, like the Herta struggles in full single target. It's okay to not work everywhere. And do not ignore Finan's very high damage floor, as that is what most players in the game will be experiencing. To be honest, I think his ceiling is higher than most people imagine, and it is not fully realized due to the way he works compared to any other character. One thing to note though is, despite his sustain trace, he probably wants to run Sustainless in 3.4. You want to finish the fight ASAP, and the more buffs you have, the better for that. And having to wait for another ult state is just like with Firefly, it's painful. He is also just solo bolo on the field, so let him shine and tank the hits because he's not dying anyway. The only scary moments are when you are setting up his ult state, but you should be fine if your team is good for him and your supports are well built. So for MOC, he is an absolute beast. For Pure Fiction, he can work and clear 40k sometimes, and you'll be able to rotate counter into Meteor into counter into Meteor non-stop. You'll have to watch the enemy animations for 10 years though. But PF is his weakest mode because it essentially delays his power. He has big burst moments, but when you're waiting for waves after waves to spawn in, his fixed AV problems really show, and you'd want E1 to help mitigate that. For Apocalyptic Shadow, some boss mechanics can hurt him, but some others he can steamroll, and with Raw Mei he can generally just slap AS silly, always within 2 ults, because his toughness damage is really high. And if the AS break mechanic grants him an ult, well, that will at least let him instantly enter his transformation again. And if you immediately ult, he will retain all buffs from before for a whole nother transformation. And so finally we can check out his teams. And this guy is going to have another video on teams because of all the setups you can do. I will not be sleeping for a couple weeks. Finan will have 3 ally slots, and the first slot should always be going to Sunday or Bronya. Ideally he is E0S1 and ideally she is E1S1. Finan generates 2 Core Flame a turn, and so his turns are still important. On top of that, both of these units will just target him with their skill and ultimate for 2 Core Flame. Sunday's energy regeneration on the ult will then add an extra 1, making him Finan's best first support right now. Yes, that's another team you want Sunday in. For the next 2 slots, you want good units for stacks generation, but if you have 2 very good stackers, you can swap the 3rd slot for a high damage Amper even if they don't generate Core Flame. So you can use Bronya or Sunday again here, so you'd be using them both. The 2 together are a very strong core duo for Finan due to how easily they stack up his ult on the first rotation. When using Bronya and Sunday, provided you have the SP, they are sufficient for his ultimate. So here, you'd be able to use a high permanent damage Amper in the 3rd slot if you want. But you can also use Remembrance MC. RMC has true damage rather than mega stacking buffs Finan already has a ton of. They also gain Mem charge even when they're departed, meaning Mem can advance Finan again after his first transformation ends. And Sparkle also works for a base speed Finan. You'd adopt the Sparkle ahead of Sunday combo, allowing for a rotation of Sparkle, Finan, Sunday, Finan. Remember though, her buffs last 1.99 turns long, so you need to ult before her stuff wears off if you want to keep it for the transformation. For the 3rd slot, Robin is the safest bet to help max out your Core Flames ASAP. She doesn't generate any per se, but her ult advances the whole team to repeat their rotation. Finan will also be giving her 25 energy at the start of combat, which is essentially making her able to ult exactly when you want it. You can use it to either ult early and save some AV for your 2nd team rotation, or you can wait till after your Finan ult is ready, ult, and then immediately Finan ult. He freezes action value with his transformation, and so when he exits, the Concerto state would still be at 111 AV, and your teammates would act at 0 AV from when his transformation ends, so immediately. This helps a ton with getting your 2nd transformation ASAP. Since she can advance your Sunday, it's like having another advancer like Bronya, so you can use Sunday and Robin together with another buffer, as these 2 Charmony Doves will generate plenty. Because of all this, Robin is one of his best supports, but she does make it very hard on SP in some teams. That's why Sunday S1 is a must with her. But if you have the Core Flame secured, a unit like Cypher can do wonders for Finan with her way less saturated damage amplification. Tribby also works amazingly in this case, and so does Raw Mei. You will definitely want her for Apocalyptic Shadow. I really like Cypher over Tribby though for 3 reasons. 1. Tribby cannot abuse DDD inside his ult, so it's just for the ult setups. Her S1 thus gains value though, and is really nice here. 2. Cypher is much more SP positive. Tribby won't be able to generate any SP in rotation 1 unless you delay your ult, which you should not do. This may be a problem if you lack Bronya E1S1 or Sunday S1. And 3. Cypher's ult nuke helps alleviate a part of his kit's problems, and Cypher will record damage the whole time he's in his transformation. No, him doing insane damage doesn't make her do more recorded damage. Remember, she doesn't record overflow damage. But Finan needs his Big Bomber ult to do Big Bomber things, and so just like I said in Cypher's video with Acheron, you can frontload a lot of damage within breakpoints rather than having to wait a whole extra cycle for his next ult. And since she loves units that can nuke wave 1 and keep the damage for wave 2, they synergize really nicely. I do prefer Tribby off element though for her res pen, and E1 Tribby is OP. But I've just listed 5-star units, even if one is standard, one is free, and one is our MC. What about 4 stars? Well, Ting Yun is an exceptional 4-star unit for Finan, thanks to her ability to ult ASAP at the start of the fight and again later on. She can abuse dance really well because of it, allowing for Finan to ult even earlier. And finally, her energy regen on the ult counts for 2 stacks, just like Sunday's does. Her buffs aren't crazy, but she's still great, easy to use, and a 4-star. Now, when first gazing upon that extra turn transformation, my mind immediately went to Yukong. I have believed that she would one day get a unit that can truly abuse her kit. And I mean, he kinda can, since he will retain all of her Roaring Bowstrings buffs. She has gigantic crit value buffs and a very high attack buff on top. Yes, it's saturated, but it's still a ton. However, she cannot generate Core Flame for your team, and so non-generators like Tribute or Cypher would be stronger anyway. But hey, she has a unit she can finally be good with, rejoice. And if you want to sustain, which I don't really recommend due to him face tanking everything for you, then you can run Ho-Ho or Lynx or Gallagher. Ho-Ho and Lynx target allies on skill and ult, and Ho-Ho notably has energy regen to trigger another Core Flame stack. Gallagher would be used in teams where you lack SP, like Sunday without Sig with a low invested Bronya. The way you rotate your team will be highly dependent on your slots. Finon gets 2 a turn, targeted ults and skills give another, and some things can give an extra stack, like energy regen abilities. There's so much you can mix and match support and rotation wise. But I hope these team guidelines help you get started, and then you'll want to use a correct turn order to ensure all the buffs are up when you ult on Finon. An example with a Sunday Bronya Tingyun team is Tingyun ults Finon, Tingyun skill, Finon skill, Sunday skill and ult, Finon skill, Bronya ult, Finon skill into ult, retaining all buffs and going nuclear. You'll have a nice 3x's Core Flame for any eventual second rotation. The best teams in testing generally always use Bronya and Sunday, and then the last slot of Robin, usually, but Rame, Cypher, Tribi can all go here, with Rame being the best in Apocalyptic Shadow. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and to people that fell asleep, sleep well. Let me know what you think of Finon and if you're gonna pull. Like and sub and share to other Finon enjoys, and thank you so much for watching and supporting. Thank you to my amazing YouTube members, thanks for watching, and have a goba day.